Hey everyone, my next guest is from Adele in Iowa. He's a 5 times MVP in Biz Apps and is a leader in the D365 space. His home state, Iowa, is a leader in farming. And it's a fun fact that one Iowa family farm grows enough food to feed 279 people. They also built the world's first electronic digital computers back in the 1930s. Now, Alex Myers is on a mission. He helps his clients at Protiviti by delivering security audit, risk, and compliance solutions. Today, he shares his unique insights in how you can find your own niche and build a profile that cuts through the noise. Um, Iowa, what's it like living there?
Uh, so it's a lot of cornfields. So it's a very agricultural heavy state in the Midwest. I was born and raised in Iowa, so I've always lived here. So I'm kind of used to it. But a lot of people that come visit from East or West Coast can't believe how flat it is because it's just miles and miles of cornfields, wheat and beans. I guess corn and beans are the biggest soybeans.
Alex, tell us about what you were like as a young boy before you got that first gig.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So I think, growing up, I've always kind of had a interest in computers or technology of some sort. I in high school, I started programming calculators, right? So like the text instrument, like TI calculators
Yeah,
that you get for like
HP, yeah.
graphing. Yeah. They all had like a very rudimentary programming language, and I learned how to do that, so I didn't have to do as much like math homework or stuff like that. And so that kind of built into always being interested in computers, either building them or, trying to figure out how they kind of worked. And that flourished into, going to college for, computer engineering and getting into the development world and really focusing in on trying to hone those more technical skills
Yes.
from that. So that I've kind of always been in that realm of wanting to figure out how those things kind of work and operate.
And were you a loner in the sense to be in technology, it's many hours by yourself? So were you naturally drawn to that? Or did you find you wanted to party, but
Mm.
technology came along?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, I went to a smaller school in Iowa, if you can imagine that. Um, so, I was involved in a lot of sports and activities and things like that.
Yep.
But yeah, I think naturally you kind of, if you're in technology, there's probably a smaller group of especially younger kids that are interested in that,
Mm.
at least at the levels that I was kind of at. So I think you kind of have to be okay, being by yourself for, to master or to gain the background and knowledge and expertise of
Exactly.
certain areas. So, um, yeah, no, I think, I was lucky enough because I did go to a smaller school to still have activities where I was involved. But yeah, a lot of the technology stuff was kind of either with one-on-one, trying to figure it out and looking online in the early days of Google, trying to find figure stuff out.
When you were by yourself, did you disappoint your mum, Professor Meyer, or I don't know, your dad, Engineer Meyer? Did they say, this isn't going anywhere? These calculators will be the death of you.
Yeah. I think they were more probably upset, when I would crash the family computer or, break something that I was trying to replace on it or things like that. I think they kind of knew that I was going to go into something technology based, so I think they knew that the end goal was going to be okay. But there were definitely times where my mom would, or dad would want me to get outside or you know,
Mm.
um, you know, uh, not be as focused on trying to figure out stuff. So it was definitely a balance to try and find.
I found that when you're trying to solve problems, there is an end goal. You're trying to fix something or get to a certain solution, but I don't know the time it'll take me. So I lose all track of time.
Yeah.
Did you find that you didn't do your chores? Were you in trouble a lot? Um, just because you just get lost in your room and it's over for the night.
Yeah. Um, I tried not to, but there were definitely, I would say that started happening, or I started doing more of that in like college and my professional career at times,
Yeah, yeah,
where you are trying to solve a problem, maybe more complex issues, and all of a sudden you look up and it's a couple hours later, and you didn't even realize it, kind of thing, because
yeah.
you're kind of locked in on solving it. But yeah, I think for me, I tell my wife it's kind of like just an itch in my brain, right? If there's a problem and I can't solve it, and so to get rid of that, like I have to solve the problem, and so that's kind of how I described it in the past.
I think if you can get your wife into D365, it would just be the best relationship ever.
Yeah, she would understand a little bit more about some of the work jargon, I'm sure, that she hears going on.
Yeah, yeah, and she could even be your, secret whisperer in your ear if you're ever
There you
trying to
go.
solve something and you go, try this.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
o- Okay. So then, you obviously have all your friends around you now where you do your own thing, um, trying to solve problems, and then someone gave you this opportunity. And I'm thinking of this because there are many people um, who are D365 consultants, imagining how come their path is going in a flat trajectory, and
Mhm.
yours obviously went quite well. Uh, what was that first bit that started you off in D365?
Yeah. So the introduction, I guess, to ERPs in general came when I started at my position at FastPath. So that would have been in late 2013 when I took the role there. That was my first introduction to any financial system or ERP at all. And I was lucky enough to be a part of an organization that and had the leadership at the time. And it was a very small company when I joined, but that allowed for that creative mindset, and really
Hmm.
allowed for somebody to take over a particular area and grow as fast as they wanted. And so that was something that I really flourished under, was this mindset of like, what could we create, right? And in our case, for the FastPass side, right, they did security, audit, and compliance reporting in ERP systems. And so my background in security, or in really kind of helped drive that, of like, how would you want to, what type of reports would you need? And I actually fell back on a lot of the reports that exist from or the types of reports that exist from like a networking security perspective, and trying to
Hmm.
bring them to like an ERP side of things, right? How would you want to see your users presented, and the roles assigned that they're assigned, the access they have, and that type of thing. And so, um, yeah, I think I have a lot of people to thank that gave me that opportunity at FastPath initially. But it was also, I took advantage of the opportunities presented from that. FastPath was a somewhat established company in the ERP space already, and so they had name recognition and could go to conferences and things like that. And so
Sure,
I
sure.
was, started down that path, and then really took that and took ownership of started off in the AX and well, at the time it's called AX7 space, and then grew into taking over all of Microsoft Dynamics, from leading that from a technology and software development perspective. And so that was kind of the path, or the opportunity, I guess, that allowed me to really get into and create that expertise in the area.
What's the bit about your personality that you love, but then turns out to be a weakness? Like Superman
Yeah.
has so many things that really work for him, and then all of a sudden you go, damn it, you overlook this.
Right.
So, for example, maybe detail orientated or
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think I don't like not being able to solve problems, going back to that. So if there's a problem, there'll be definitely times where I get stuck on it and maybe don't, there may be other things that I should be focusing on, but I'm still like thinking about that problem in my head
hmm.
a little bit. And so, there are definitely times when I have to, just step away and put that problem aside, kind of close that mental box on it and move on to something else, because there's other priorities coming in. And I think the other, whether it's a pro or a con, is the uh, I have, I'll hear something at a conference, or I'll talk to somebody, and I'll have an idea that I want to add to, an open source project that I'm a part of, or writing a blog post on. And so you have this backlog of things that, yeah, this never ending list of to-dos kind of. And so you kind of have to try to prioritize that as well. And so trying to like separate that side of it from everything else you have going on in your life can sometimes be difficult. But yeah, those you just have to figure out the best way to kind of weigh those personality traits and see if you can direct those into more positive aspects of your overall, personal or professional and personal lives.
Yeah, I'll share with you something of mine. I love getting certificates, and my partner is in D365 as well. And when she goes through and does a certificate, she goes through so slowly, and I just laugh at her. I go, ha ha ha. And I go, bang, 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 I knock out, I get a certificate. And I go, look, I'm first. And
Yeah.
then she looks at me and she doesn't feel bad or anything. She finishes the certificate, and I could ask her any question and she knows the deep, deep answer.
Mhm.
Whereas because I rushed and I thought I was first, I don't know that in-depth
Yep.
answer. So I'm
Right.
seeing the other side of apparent
Right.
win. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway,
Yeah.
okay. The mastering D365 or the specific niche that you chose, many people try to go broad because in order to get a job, you have to, well, um, jump into many areas, right?
Mhm.
Whereas you actually went and niche down, a niche within a niche. And it's surprising, but you've actually made it work for you. Can that work for anyone else? Or would you say, don't do this? You suffered enough for all of us.
I think you can definitely, like, I don't want to make anybody shy away from being the broader generalist, right? A functional or technical consultant, and being that, because that's absolutely a need in the market for both of those
Yeah.
as well. But there's also always going to be needs for those highly specific areas, right? Because any ERP system is large enough that it's very difficult to be an expert in everything, right? There are areas you're going to
Mhm.
be have more experience in, or better familiarity, and there's going to be areas that you don't. And so, in my case, right, I again had the background of FastPath was all about security audit and compliance. So I could go as deep as I wanted to in that space. And one of the key things that I found was there was very little documentation, or very little, public awareness of how did this actually work behind the scenes. And so I found that gap in the market. And so I wanted to kind of create a space where if somebody had a question about any part of security or licensing, or you know um, administration of F&O, that they were able to find the blogs that I had created, or so that somebody else didn't have to go through the same pains that I did, kind of learning this from scratch. And so I found, if you're going to go into a niche area, I would say that you
Mhm.
want to try and find those gaps, because that's where you're going to have the best growth opportunity, right? Because if you're trying to go in a niche area and there's already other, an overabundance of people in that area, right? It's going to be very difficult to make yourself kind of stand out.
How, how does someone who's trying to get a job imagine that being so niche can open a door for you? Because it seems counterintuitive,
Right.
especially if I've got
Yeah,
a family and I'm worried.
100%. Yeah, and the path that I took, a lot of it, it may not apply to a lot of other people, right? Because I was lucky enough to find the company that focused on this one niche area, that I was able to be that very deep subject matter expert in that area and still keep a job, right? Because that's what they were focusing in on. That may not work for a lot of other people, but there's um, it- there's other ways to look at this too, as far as if um, a lot of companies will look for like freelance consultants. So if you want to go down that path and you want to be very a niche, you want to focus on warehousing, you want to focus on AP or AR, right? Whatever the area is. I think there's definitely opportunities there if you're willing to do either contracting or more of that type of route. But if you're going to go into consulting or looking at that route, I would say that you're probably going to want to have a wider range. Now, you may still have areas that you focus on, but maybe it's not like your entire focus is on that area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether or not you being highly specialized allowed you to get a profile. And then by getting that profile, you're noticed, right?
Mhm.
So therefore, could an employer say to themselves, I think even with that specific skill, he could jump to this other skill because it's just you applying yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I was, again, there were some other even though the content that I create is very niche, right? It does spread out behind the scenes too. So publicly that may not be visible, right? But when you start getting
Hmm.
into security and audit and compliance and licensing topics, right? A lot of the discussions that I have with clients today is around their financial processes, right? Or their warehousing processes or manufacturing processes, right? So I had to learn some of those other unrelated areas because when we're trying to look at like segregation of duties or separation of duties, right? It's, there's cases where you have to understand how the system is performing certain financial processes or tasks to be able to, illustrate to clients or explain to them how what the options are for avoiding that. So, publicly, a lot of my content is focused in on, the security side. But when you start getting into like client engagements, a lot of it is a little bit more broad, right? You still use a lot of the background, of course, of that highly specialized area, but you kind of get forced to learn some of the other areas of the system simply because clients are going to ask you, well, how take your security knowledge and apply it to these other modules, right? So that's kind of I learned a lot of the other modules from a functional standpoint just organically through like client interaction and them asking questions and me taking, like you said, the same like drive or um, whatever you want to call
Focus,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Focus area and moving it to another area.
Yeah, you told me about a book that you read, They Ask You Answer,
Yeah.
um, and then how it influenced you that many people I found as well are gatekeepers, and they see that their secret sauce is the secret of their success. Therefore,
Yeah.
I'll hide it. And you actually flipped this in your mind and took the opposite view. Tell them everything.
Yeah. So one of the things that I kind of alluded to this idea earlier, but like if somebody goes and searches for Dynamics 365 security, right? I want my name to be one of the first results in Google. And the reason for that, and again, like you said, a lot of the times when you get into either ISVs or consulting firms, right? There's this idea that you need to protect the knowledge that right? Because if it gets out, right, your competitor can take it. But at the source of it, like the idea that I always come back to is like knowledge in and of itself shouldn't be hidden, right? It's what you
Okay.
do
Yeah.
with that knowledge to actually, should show your value. And so in my mind, there's no point in trying to hide how a system works or something that you find. And so that's why I like to document very detailed blog posts on here's how I was able to generate this data, or here's what this process looks like. Now, if you want to take it and, it's really about the application of what do you do with that information that provides the value to the client or to your employer.
So you don't take the approach of logging something as you're discovering it. You'd rather discover it, figure out what to do with it, and create some sort of polished piece.
In certain cases, there are definitely times where I'm going through and I'll find, oh, this works differently than I would expect, or like here's I wasn't able to find this one or figure out how this one thing was working, and I finally did, right? So I'll document it. But a lot of especially for the open source stuff, right? That's
Mm.
obviously getting feedback. So the open source projects that I'm a part of, right, are taking either ideas that I had or information from the community, right, and giving that polished product, right, creating some solution and giving it back. So in that case, it's more of a polished product, but in most cases, it's more about here's something interesting that I found, or some, I was going through this process and, it was difficult for me to figure out how to do it. So here's the process that worked for me. Like any way that I can help to, uh, simplify or have not have somebody else go through the same hardships that I went through to figure something out. Those are absolutely blog posts that I've created too.
I was speaking to an open source contributor 2 days ago, and I said to him, "You're developing a set of tools. It's amazing." And then I know this other person who's doing the same, different tools, but they're both open source. Why don't you join them together? And
Mm.
then you have, the double the market. And he said, "I'm sorry, but this other person writes a bit spaghetti." And I write a bit, neat and
Yeah.
tidy. So if I were to merge the two, I would have to contend with that
Mm.
messy room
Yeah.
before I could. Yeah. So do you ever see open source projects merging together so we just have one toolkit we install?
Yeah. Software developers can be a little bit
Oh, artsy.
territorial. Yeah, of their code and how they write. And it kind of goes back to the personalities too, right? If somebody is more carefree, right, they may not have the stringent best practices in place that somebody else
Error
does.
checking. Yeah.
Yeah, error checking, logging,
Naming of
unit
variables.
tests. Yes, all of those. And so, anytime you have open source code, there's going to be the potential that somebody is, maybe not going to write something the same way that you do. In my case, I'm the initial creator of the toolkit. Anybody's free. It's on GitHub, right? You can take that code and do whatever you want to with it yourself. If they do check it back in, I like to, there's certain things that I like to follow. So I try to make sure and give that feedback as far as on the different check-ins or pull requests. Um, but
Sounds like
there's
a
nothing
confession.
stopping. Yeah,
You're
there's
confessing
nothing.
to me.
There's nothing stopping. The one thing about open source that I really like is like there's nothing if somebody else wants to go and take that code and make spaghetti out of it, or if they feel
Okay.
like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
writing incorrectly, right, and they want to fix it, there's nothing stopping them from taking that and doing those same things. So it's one of the benefits of open source is the flexibility of it. Obviously, that there's also downsides of maintaining um, QA and all of that portion of it too. But that's kind of I think one of the cool things about any open source project.
You know what I often wonder about inventors, creators like yourself, is that do you see the marketing side? Because just say someone took your admin toolkit, made it admin, and they put fancy graphics, blah, blah, blah. They did a huge marketing campaign. They popped it out for a couple $100 per copy.
Mhm.
They sold 10,000 and they became squillionaires. Do you ever look at it and say, if I only put more effort into the marketing side as compared to the creating side,
Yeah.
or have you reached your Zen place? I don't care what happens with it. Be
Um,
honest.
no, yeah. I mean, I think there's always going to be, I think it would depend on the attribution portion for me, right? If somebody
Yeah,
goes out and wants to take that and put the effort in to do all of the marketing around it and, they want to repackage it themselves and do whatever, that's one of the other sides of open source, right? In the
yeah, yeah.
licensing model that I'm using. So that's 100% a reasonable
Possibility,
thing that
yeah.
they could do, possibility they could do. As long as they're attributing me that, I was, the initial creator, there's nothing that I can like, I may have that initial feeling, like you said, of like, oh, I missed out, like being upset about it, but that's one of the other sides of open source, right? That somebody can
Good.
do that. Um, and so for me though, it's more like I really like the overarching idea of being able to create really cool solutions to help customers. So if
Yes.
that means that I'm going to lose out on, somebody, taking that and making a, um, some sort of package around it, that's something that I can at least live with. Again, as long as if they take it and say that they wrote it, I might have a separate discussion. But
Side
if they're,
discussion.
yeah, but if they're, attributing me, then it makes sense.
Where on your level of mastery, from 1 to 10, are
Mhm.
you? Do you have several more years before you reach peak Alex, and then you're in decline, or do you think you're just building and building? It just keeps getting better, like fine wine.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I think that answer could probably, it depends on the area, right, that you're
Yeah.
talking about. There's a lot of room that I want to learn more about from a functional standpoint. Um, just and that's one of the big things, like how do this particular persona, right, a person use F&O, right? Trying to get like that kind of answers can help from a technical side, right? Design the system or create extensions on it, right? That help drive
Mm,
the usage or maybe make it easier for that person. So I think down that perspective, I think there's a lot of room for myself personally to
mm,
grow. Um, you can always be better technically. You can always be better in a particular area. I think my background kind of speaks to the focus area that I have and the expertise I have in around the security audit and compliance space. Um, but there's always new things that you can do with that, right? So like you can take the telemetry data that was added to F&O recently, right? How can that impact the security audit and compliance space? Or take Copilot, how can that impact security audit and compliance space, right? And so there's always new things that are being added where you can build on top of the current knowledge to get to. And I don't think it's a like an end goal or an end point, right? That you can say, I know everything about this, right? And so,
mm.
how do I, there's nowhere else for me to go. It's more about, how can I apply the new features and functionalities to what I know to help create a better product?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm thinking about someone who's early in their career, and
Yep.
they're wondering, okay, how do I build up my personal brand? I've noticed that
Gotcha.
you've started to mold almost by the way you write,
Mhm.
and I can see your structure, your way of thinking, and I could almost imagine how you would be in a project. You're very dependable, reliable. What are the other things that you know about personal branding that you would recommend to newbies who are starting out on that MVP journey, for example?
Yeah. One of the big things that I'll say is, I guess there's a couple points. One is that nothing, as you're first creating it, as you're starting off on your journey, don't feel like everything has to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect, right? My early blogs are. I wish I could go back and there's things that I would fix or change about them, but I don't, because I want to leave those to show the progression, right? To show that there's a change going on, and so really to first and foremost, don't feel like anything has to be perfect. The biggest thing that I can say is just to start creating whatever your content is going to be, whatever your area that you want to write about that you find interesting, right? Whatever viewpoint that you're going to take. Um, the hardest thing is to start, and then the second hardest thing is to keep going, right? To be consistent with your output, right? Because you see a lot of people that will write all these blogs or white papers or do all this content for 3 months, right? 2 or 3 months, and then all of a sudden you'll see it start to trail off, right? Because they lose interest or they lose, they didn't realize the time commitment or whatever it is. And so make sure you set a maintainable like goal or maintainable amount of work, or you're managing the workload to be maintainable in the long term, right? Because you want to make sure that you are releasing content in a somewhat periodic fashion and that you're consistent in, putting your putting out whatever that content is, whether it's blog posts or YouTube videos or podcasts or whatever that may be, right? Or a combination of those, right? That's really what is going to start to build that personal brand over the long term is
Yes.
the consistency, and then the finding whatever it's going to be, that the area that you want to write on or the areas you want to write on, right? Making sure that that content gets in front of the right people is also important, right? Because if you want to make sure, at least for me, right, I try to make sure that I'm posting in certain LinkedIn groups, or um, part of, or tagging certain hashtags or things like that, right? To make sure that it's the different social media platform algorithms are putting this in front of the people that would care about it, right? And trying, so there's a little SEO, search engine optimization, some tricks to doing some of that. And a lot of that I learned the hard way. And I'm still well short of probably being a master in that area, but there's definitely things you can do to help get your content in front of the correct audience for that type of consumption.
True. I see your point. I was thinking about also your specific specialization.
Mm.
We talked about the projects you and I looked down, and we said, what are the two major methods of digging into a security project? And you
Yeah,
said, well, it depends if it's public or private. We look at the risk, the audit requirements of digging down into security roles.
yeah.
Can you share that again with me?
Sure.
Your approach.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there's a lot of different things that kind of go in as parameters to that type of project and will decide what method you're going to utilize. You kind of mentioned a couple of them, right? Size of the organization, public and private. What's the timeline and obviously budget they're going to dedicate to this type of project. But from a technical side, once you start getting into, what are the options for doing a security design or redesign, you're really looking at whether you want to take a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. And those are
Mm,
both terms that I've coined. But the idea being, right, Microsoft delivers out-of-the-box security, right? And a lot of customers will go, okay, well, I'm just going to, um, utilize that because Microsoft is, it's delivered from them. It must be correct. But if you have audit requirements and you are looking at the access that those roles give, those roles were built from, especially in D365 finance and operations, those roles are built from a functional standpoint, not really a security or audit and compliance standpoint. So they
yes.
grant this wide-ranging access, right, to Microsoft wants to show off all the bells and whistles of a particular area, and that may not be required for a user. And so um, really, when we start looking at it, this top-down approach is taking those out of the box roles, duties, and privileges, right? And looking to see where can we take away the access that your users don't need. So that'll get you close to what the true security for those users. The other option that you have is what we would call bottom-up approach, where
Hmm.
you're going to start from scratch and build up your privileges, duties, and roles. Based on the access that those users need, right? Whether you're using task recordings to help with that process or some other option, right, to determine that. So you kind of have those two different ideas in use or options. And what we actually come up and see in a majority of cases is that a lot of customers will end up doing some sort of hybrid approach to that, where they'll take their high risk areas of the system, right, around their finances, and they'll apply least privilege security or that bottom up approach and actually, go down and ensure that users only have the access they need. But then in other areas, right, they may use the top down approach or even out of the box security from Microsoft, right? They know the user
Yep.
may need access to, you know, um, time and expense, or being able to approve um, certain budgets or something like that, right? And they may just use an out of the box role to do that, right? Because there's not as much risk there from it. And so you don't have to do one or the other. Those are the two main ideas, right? And how you actually how you break that down and utilize it is kind of up to the individual organization.
I remember sharing that I created these deny roles, and
Mhm.
I think I twitched a little bit because you said when your deny role starts to get bigger than the original role,
Yeah,
you've got a problem. So
right.
restrict it 75-25 or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the deny permission in F&O is extremely powerful and can be a great tool to use to ensure that users, are can in no way get access to a particular object. And it can be used in conjunction with roles that grant access, right? If you want to say, I have this role, the initial role that is the accountant role, right? But I have this other deny permission that doesn't allow them to, you know, um, create purchase orders, right? Or something like that, whatever it is. And so you're denying that portion of it, but everything else the accountant role has, right? You can assign those both to a user and everything works. Um, Normally what we would see or the recommendation that I would have is the if you start to get into a point where you have a base role and you're denying more than like 25% of that role, right? We probably should be creating multiple roles in that case, right? And not creating just a deny
mm-mm,
role to deny more and more of that. And the reason for it is because it gets very tricky to maintain going forward if you ever want to modify the role itself, right? You have to contend with, okay, well, did I deny this permission already? Right. I have to go and make sure that none of my other denies are going to impact the grants that I'm doing. And so it can just get a little bit harder to maintain if you're going to go down that route.
I see what you're saying. You having to check in two areas, and your mind has to be
Mhm.
whether or not it's been given or not. Okay, so for the next steps in your career, I know you're
Yeah.
going to Dynamics Con. You're doing a a presentation.
Mhm.
How did you get invited to this, or do you request to be a speaker because you have something illuminating you want to show us?
Yeah. So there's a lot of the majority of conferences, right, will have a call for speakers in some way, shape, or form. So if you would like Dynamics Con Live is coming up, that's a great conference. It's going to be in Denver, and then you have
Mm,
the larger like Dynamic Community Summit conference in the U.S., and that's later this year in San Antonio. And so both of those have a call for speakers where you can submit sessions, and then there's a committee of people that go through and pick out which ones will actually be presenting at those conferences. So um, it really is a way, coming up with sessions and things like that is kind of an art form in and of itself. All right, how do you take the knowledge that you have and try to create a session that people want to
mm, mm.
come and listen to, right? So there's definitely a little bit of a science, a little bit of both parts to that of trying to figure out what that looks like. But yeah, so I'll be, I guess, speaking in on at Dynamics Con Live. I'll be speaking in on I have a security and licensing session
Yes.
that I'll be speaking on, and then also I'll be co-presenting with Peter Raymer from RSM
Yep. Yep.
on kind of over the topics that we have been going over of how do you create a personal brand, how do you promote yourself, what are things that you can do to increase your SEO, or what are things you can do. I want to start a blog. What are the steps to do that? Or I want to start a YouTube channel. What are the steps to do that? And what do I need to think about as I'm going through that? And so there's a lot of things that you know MVPs and others who have created content kind of have figured out along the way, and things that we would avoid or things that we would do differently. And so again, trying to alleviate some of the barrier to entry and to try and make that process smoother is really what we're trying to accomplish with that session. So really looking forward to that one.
Do you find there's a psychology aspect to it where I know is it the title that draws people in? Is it that little snippet? Is it your name? Like if you just put anything and you just randomly chose a title, would they still come and go, I got to see this guy?
I I think so. There's a couple different approaches that people can take. Some will do more, and I've done both. And it's as far as trying to come up with a clever title or trying to come up with the way that I normally try to approach the title and the description that I've seen work. And again, this is just my personal take
Hmm.
on it, is to try to word it in a way that you're showing how you can solve a business problem. right? If you just go in and your title is just, I'm going to show you this feature in finance and operations, right? Or in any ERP system for that matter, right? Now, if you're just talking about Copilot, right, or something that a lot of people may have questions on, maybe you can get away with that. But if you're, talking about a baked-in feature, you may not get as much reception from that, simply because, people are like, I know how that works. Why would you do that? But if you take that same presentation and you word it in a way that you're going to show, that feature and how you can help a business, cut down on their time it takes to do a process or their cost to do a process, right? All of a sudden now you're putting that in language where the decision makers or the people doing it are like, oh, well, I want to see how to improve my efficiency, or I want to see how to save money, right? And so anytime you can try and tie it back to helping with a business case, I've seen that draw you know, uh, be fairly well received from that. But yeah, there's definitely others who have their own are very effective on trying to figure out catchy titles or different things too that also work really well. So definitely more than one way to go about it.
I wonder if we talk in the future, whether or not there's an aspect of helping someone else master something and grow their profile, whether or not that is attractive compared to saying, well, your company, the business, will be more profitable from this. Like, secretly everyone wants to be the superhero in their own story.
Yeah.
Um, that does it lean that way as compared to company efficiency and effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a fine line between what's best for you. Sometimes uh, there can be a difference between what's best for you professionally and what's best for the organization professional or organization itself. And so if you can find a way to align those, it makes it much easier. So speaking from experience. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to kind of look at to see if there's, what that looks like for somebody else, right? If they take a similar or have a slightly different path, but a similar overall like goal.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see as the next trends for D365? I know you mentioned Copilot, for example, the
Mhm.
Power Platform. What is happening in your mind? Is it us being um, set up by Microsoft to push out these products because we get excited about it? Or do you actually see, I feel like I'm almost in a test version of Copilot. I'm
Mhm.
part of the product to evolve it.
That's that's definitely probably true in some way, shape, or form. Is I think we're all kind of in the test phase of Copilot and trying to help Microsoft figure out how to best
What do we
utilize
do with
it.
this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I do think, obviously Microsoft and many others, there's definitely a play for the AI portion of it. I think the one thing that is lacking currently is not AI's effectiveness itself, but where's the actual business use case where it can be beneficial. And I know that there's definitely already some from a finance perspective and supply chain perspective, but for a day-to-day user, right? What business cases, what's the use case for, somebody that's you know uses F&O on a day-to-day basis, right? Where can they utilize Copilot to get the greatest impact or ROI on it? I definitely think that that's something that's going to be interesting to see evolve and grow. You mentioned the integration with Power Platform. I think that that's going to continue to be done. What
Mm.
I would probably end up seeing or will in some way, shape, or form is more of the convergence of those, right? They're going to get closer and closer together in the sense that it's going to be easier and more aligned to, get data from one system to another. They're going to start, or even more closely work together and have that data flow from point A to point B, with using Dataverse and Microsoft Fabric and other technologies to try and get there. So I think that you're going to start to see that more. And then, you know, I think just overall that you're probably going to still see other portions of, there's other things in Microsoft outside of biz apps, right? From an Azure perspective, right? How can we start to bring in like the telemetry data that we talked about earlier, right? That's stored in not Synapse, sorry, App Insights, right? How can how do we start to use maybe some of those other like features and functionality, right? How do we bring some of that data back in to utilize within F&O as well? So it might be like things surrounding not strictly business apps, but other Microsoft products, right? To bring in, can I take something from a Word document and have it, go into F&O, right? Or Excel, or obviously can already do that, but that type of integration would
Integrations,
be
yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So yeah,
True, true.
integrations from an overview would be integrations in general, right? That we would see.
I could see that as being full-time roles for many people, that they may not
Mhm.
know the functionality of D365, but I read often that there's 150 apps in an enterprise. We're
Yeah.
only one of them, and
Yeah.
we haven't soaked into the rest of that ecosystem. So
Right.
there's plenty of room there to do it. Okay, closing off, thank you so much. But what would be your advice to someone starting out? We know we talked about specialization, but that growth path towards building their own brand, what's the one thing that they should be open to doing to, to get out there?
Yeah. I think uh it's a great question. Um, I think there's and I'm gonna break the rules slightly. I think there's multiple things that you can do from a technical and functional perspective to help round out to give the baseline, and then you can start to really, if you have somebody that's coming in brand new that may have not dealt with an ERP before, right? Make use of the free tools from Microsoft and other, MVPs and stuff, right? They have Microsoft Learn programs. You talked about the certifications that you can
Yes.
get to as well, which are normally fairly cheap to get. But then the blogs and white papers and YouTube videos and everything else that is out there freely available, like um, don't don't feel like you're by yourself. Don't feel like you're on your own. Like there are others, there are people out there trying that want to help, right? So make sure you have that. As far as once you start getting into your career and like looking forward, that's where you start to look at, what paths do I really want to try and go down? Am I more functional side? Am I technical? Right. And then trying to decide, you know, not everybody is going to want to do the content creation path, or not everybody's going to want to go down the
Yeah.
same the same path. But from a professional standpoint, right, I think it's always being hungry to learn, but then also
Mm.
know that there's others in the community, right? If somebody, and I'm speaking, I know that there are other MVPs that feel the same way, right? That, you know, you can feel free to reach out and ask questions, right? Or feel free to post on message boards, and don't feel like, the questions you ask are, not, that are too simple, or that you're just, anything like that. Everyone started out, not having knowledge, and, in that space, and started to really, move into whatever they were, progressed in. And so really using whatever resources you have available. And, there's a lot of people in the community that are willing to help, if you, reach out to them and ask.
Yeah, I went to a recent networking conference, and the person who organized it, Austin Kent and
Mhm.
Michelle Mancini, they said, outside of your own skills, the best thing you can have is a network, because
Yep.
it's clearly where your next job offer will come from, where your assistance will come from, and we never pay attention to it till we're unemployed and then looking for a job, right? And it's probably too late to
Yeah.
say, Hey, Alex, I haven't spoken to you for 8 years. Can you help me out here?
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I think networking is extremely important part to your professional career in general, but especially in the dynamics community. I think there's a lot of people, but it's small enough that, it's crazy how many people you run into at a conference, and you're like, how many people you recognize or know, or from the community or anything else. So definitely make sure that you are reaching out and just getting involved in some way.
Well, I hope I catch up one day in person with you, Alex. I look forward to it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It's been nearly an hour now, and I look forward to your next release of the admin toolkit as well.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Chris. It's great talking to you.
Thank you, Alex. Take care.
Yeah.
All the best with the Dynamics Con.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Catch you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mobiz is a community-run organization. We believe in liberating people from the shackles of monotony, inspiring them to dream bigger and reach higher. We empower them to focus on the things that matter, growing their skills, solving new problems, and helping others on a global scale.
We eliminate manual work that stands between people and their future, preventing them from learning new technologies, unleashing their talents, and leaving a legacy that has a lasting impact.
Freedom doesn't wait. Join us at mobiz.com.